Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Skalberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be partnering today with Conroe ISD. I always like to start by going over just a few housekeeping items because inquiring minds want to know. We are in webinar mode today, which means that we can't see you or hear you. We know you're there. We're glad that you're here, and we invite you to put your questions today in the chat box. If you're planning your time, we're going for an hour today. And today we're going to be talking about the key steps to transition success. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors, chartered special needs consultants, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. Our whole firm is nuanced in helping families plan for the future of a loved one with a disability. I myself am a parent to 4 adult children, 3 with disabilities. And so what I would tell you is here at our firm, we eat, sleep, and breathe planning for the future of a loved one. This is such an important topic, and there's so many things that go into play when it comes into transitioning our kids into adulthood. There's so many different meanings for transitioning. We think of transitioning in education, transitioning in housing, transitioning in medical or our physician services and things like that. But there's a lot of things that change from a financial perspective, from a legal perspective, when our loved ones turn 18, and things that have been status quo all these years start changing. So we're going to be talking about a lot of those things and things that you should have on your radar. Okay. So when it comes to planning for special needs, things are a little bit different. You know, you have your traditional financial advisor. They have similar licenses, and they may help with money management, retirement fund rollovers, IRA, planning income, things like that. We do those things as well. But when we have a child who has a disability who may have care needs for the rest of their life, not just your life, careful planning goes into play, because it's almost like a third retirement bucket if you're married, a second retirement bucket if you're single. And so planning for those 25 to 35 years that your loved one may live beyond your life, it's really, really important. So we help people plan for the future by putting lifetime care plans in place, protection plans. We do a lot of transition planning, helping set up ABLE accounts, preserving eligibility for state and federally funded programs. People come to us because they want to learn about how much money do I need to fund a special needs trust. Where can I have money in the right buckets that's going to preserve that eligibility for those state and federally funded programs like SSI or Medicaid. We are nationally certified as Social Security advisors. In fact, we have a specialized software that is super cool because it takes into consideration a disabled adult child, and it tells us exactly when and how for you to pull the trigger on your Social Security benefits to maximize benefits for your disabled child or children. And it tells us right down to the month and year of when you should pull the trigger on these things. When it comes to planning for special needs, your situation is specialized. So there's a lot of things that I'm a fan of, do it yourself, DIY projects and things like that. But when it comes to planning for a loved one with a disability, I would argue that it's not a do-it-yourself project. We do suggest, whether you work with us or you work with somebody else, work with a specialist that is specifically nuanced with special needs. There's fewer than 0.1% of financial advisors are nuanced in working with families that have a loved one with a disability. This holds true for attorneys. There are many, many, many attorneys out there, but not all of them are, specialized in understanding people with disabilities. There are specific estate planning attorneys that are nuanced in creating special needs trust, and helping with guardianship and alternatives to guardianship. So when it comes to your legal documents, we also believe that you should really truly work with a specialist that is nuanced for people with disabilities. It is critically important. And when we make this misstep of either doing it yourself or working with a generalist, what we find that happens a lot is you end up paying the fees twice. because you end up paying to have what you had done corrected. So whether you've done a lot of planning, you've done a little planning, a lot of times people come to us, they already have an advisor, they've taken a lot of steps. Maybe they have a special needs trust, maybe they have guardianship in place, they've done a lot of planning, but they just want a second opinion or a look under the hood to make sure that what they already have in place is going to be appropriate for the individual's needs, appropriate for the family's wants, and it's also going at the same time to preserve eligibility for those future programs. So developing a future care plan now is going to answer a lot of questions. We hear from families all the time, and again, myself included, people that lose sleep at night thinking about who's going to care for my child when I'm gone, what's happening after high school. Like prior to age 18, we've lived in this cocoon of private or public education, cocoon of multidisciplinary medical approaches through pediatrics. And then everything changes when they turn 18, and the medical changes sometime between 18 and 21. It just depends on the practice. But so what we suggest is not waiting until a crisis happens. There's, a medical emergency of one of the parents, and they can no longer provide the caregiving services they once did. Something happens. We don't want to wait until we're in crisis mode. Waiting till crisis mode is expensive, and you may or may not achieve the success that you're wanting to achieve if you're operating under crisis. Okay, so some of the things that we think about when it comes to supporting your child, and we suggest researching options early, post high school educational and vocational paths now. Many of the schools have 18 plus programs. They have various names where your child with a disability could stay in the public high school till age 22. There are many programs that help with life skills and kind of promoting independence. There are private transition programs that are private pay as well. Some of these programs have long waiting lists, so we do encourage you to look at those programs early. We also think about future housing. What does that look like? So some families, they say, my loved one's going to live with me until the day I die. Nothing wrong with that if that's how you feel about it. Other families say, once my child turns 18, I want them to live outside of the home in a residential living situation that promotes independence and helps them have some autonomy from me and grow as an individual and live their best life. So whether you're somewhere in between there, maybe that looks like 25 or 35, and maybe it's not until the day you die. We want you to start touring those facilities, getting a feel for what feels right, where is a good fit. Some of these places are awesome because they have transportation. Some of the residents work outside of the facility. Sometimes they work within the facility. Sometimes they're paid opportunities. Sometimes they're volunteer opportunities. But looking at this, dipping your toe in, touring these places, most of these places require a tour to be able to get on their waiting list. And being on their waiting list gives you the opportunity to say yes in the future if you need to. You still have the opportunity to say no. But what we're trying to avoid here is that they're not on any list and then the crisis happens or then something happens and you need a place for them to go and there's nowhere for them to go. So that is something that is really important. And so there's different paths. So some of our kids with disabilities, they might be twice exceptional. The plan may be that they are going to college and higher education. Maybe it's a vocational program that they're planning on going to. Maybe they're going to go to work. There are a lot of registered apprenticeships for people with disabilities where they're learning a skill and also being paid to learn that skill that kind of blossom into full-time work. Some of you may be on here today and say, my child's never going to work, and that is okay. But the bottom line is having a plan and working your plan. And then, there's always room for adjustments to your plan along the way. So we think of that as well. So one thing that we want to talk about is when we think about future caregivers, a lot of times people say, well, I got 4 kids and one of the other kids is going to be the future caregiver of my son with a disability. And we suggest that you think carefully about that. A lot of our kids are similar ages and they have hopes and dreams. They want to go to school, higher education. They might want to get married and have a home and have kids themselves, whatever else. And so sometimes those siblings, even though the siblings love their brother or sister, if they may not be a good fit for a future caregiver. So what we like to think of as a properly funded special needs trust that is going to provide financial resources for the future care of the loved one, and maybe the sibling might be a successor trustee of the trust that's going to pay for said care for individual. There are situations where there are family dynamic situations where there are siblings that are 15 or 20 years older than the individual with a disability, so they may be a good fit for a future caregiver. So it's just important to look at this. And when you're looking at residential living situations is finding out can that facility be a successor guardian of the person in the event that you are incapacitated or deceased. So when you're no longer here, could they take on guardianship if that is going to be the case? Okay. So some of the transition periods that we think about are turning 18 years old, leaving high school, leaving the parents' house, and then when the parents are gone. So those are all kind of things that we hit on just a moment ago. So the foundational things that I want to talk about is where to start. So this is really a journey. It's not an event, and use these 4 pillars to build a roadmap. So define your vision. I always tell parents, I want you to think about your vision of how you hope your retirement will look. A loved one that has a disability that's going to be with us for the rest of our life, our semblance of retirement looks vastly different than those that have neurotypical kids that are going to go off to college, go to work, get married, sail off into the sunset. This is kind of, I would say that this is the marathon, not the sprints. It's the long haul. So I never have to tell parents to think about your kid. All we do is think about our kids and their betterment and how they're going to get where they're going and success for them. But what do you want for yourself? What does the good life look like for both yourself and your loved one? We're considering housing, social life, employment, daily support. And really what we help people do is align the financial plan with the actual lifestyle that you envision. Okay. And so this might, some families will see, they do day programs. They called them Day Hub for years, and then they changed the name to ISS. And that might be 5 days a week. It could be 2 days a week. It could be 3 days a week. Some families have their kids go to summer camps. There are many, many summer camps for adults with disabilities, including intellectual disabilities. One of the things that we think of, even if you're a parent that says, my kid's going to live with me until the day I die, we do suggest dipping your toe in along the way of some of these transition programs or summer camps or things like that. Because what we do know is most people without disabilities don't always adapt well to change, but our kids on the spectrum, ADHD, other diagnoses, change really sends them into a tailspin that is not positive, right? So our suggestion is like dipping your toe in, trying some of these things, trying some of the overnight situations and things like that. So that way, if they are going to live with you for as long as you live or until you're unable, then they've had some exposure to this as opposed to living with you for 40 years and they're 60 years old and then you pass away and they're grieving and they are feeling like a fish out of water where they've never been exposed to any of these things, and it feels very, very scary and they feel very alone. So that is one tip I have. So I'm not for or against residential living situations early or later, but I am for having a plan post high school. What we want to avoid is them coming home and sitting around and playing video games or watching TV all day. We want them to have community. We want to have supports. We want them to be building and growing some of the life skills. Maybe they'll live alone. Maybe they'll need some help always. Maybe they'll never be able to live alone. but we want them to be growing. We want them to be learning and building some autonomy away from parents. Okay. So the next one is the letter of intent. And we have an entire webinar on letter of intent. I think of this as a family love letter. This is, as a parent, you have forgotten more than anybody will ever know as it relates to your child, their diagnosis, their meds, their doctors, their needs, their likes, their wants. And if you became incapacitated tomorrow, does somebody else know all of this? And a lot of times, even in your own household, maybe your spouse doesn't know all of these things because maybe you are at home and maybe the spouse works. Maybe you're in charge of handling all of the appointments and the spouse handles and bringing in financial resources and other things. So a letter of intent is really going to, it is a form fillable 20-page document that it tells everything a person needs to know about your child. Are they getting public benefits? Who is your attorney? Is there life insurance in place? What are your religious preferences? What are their diagnoses? What makes them thrive and do well? What makes things fall apart? So the letter of intent is something that we suggest that you complete. We don't suggest you complete it in one sitting because it is a lot. But we do suggest that you review this. I would say annually or more often if the diagnosis that your loved one has is fluid and is forever changing. Build your professional dream team. Don't do this alone. You need 2 specific experts in your corner and maybe even 3. A special needs financial planner to help you model the gap between government benefits and actual cost of your vision. And a special needs estate attorney to draft third-party special needs trust, first-party special needs trust, wills, healthcare power of attorney, guardianship, those types of things. And then the third person that I would add to the team is a CPA that is specifically nuanced with special needs trust. The taxation of special needs trust is a little quirky, and I suggest having a CPA on your team. And then the fourth thing that we want to talk about is gathering the necessary planning documents. What do you need to do? Okay, so we would suggest getting a list of all of the things, a checklist like IEP, ITP records, diagnostic reports, social security statements, guardianship, power of attorney, any legal documents, any investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, insurance, any type of vehicle that you have put in place that is either a legal document or a financial resource that one day may be used to A, fund your retirement, or B, fund a special needs trust and future care for your loved one. While recognizing that many families have multiple children that don't have disabilities, and we're looking at planning for weddings, maybe higher education, maybe it's a down payment on the house. So gathering those documents and having those for review is going to be important in this stage. Okay, so in the letter of intent, we kind of talked about this a little bit. What to include, and again, we do have a form fillable template for this, and this is just really going to be all of the details of your child. Again, we go through the motions. We're parents, we're caregivers. This is what we do day in and day out every day. This is what we eat, sleep, and breathe, but somebody else doesn't do that. So if you were incapacitated today, or if you were deceased, we want to make sure that the information is there so that the person that would be sliding into your role in the future is equipped with as much resources as available for them to be successful in the role. Filling a parent's role is probably an impossibility, right? But getting as close to it as we can is going to be really, really important. So we want to talk about avoiding the common planning pitfalls and how to protect your child's benefits. So we're going to talk about 5 things here. Separate assets. Keep personal and special needs funds clearly separated to avoid asset limit disqualification. We also, as we're approaching age 18, we want to make sure that our child, if they have assets, that they are in the right buckets, which would be if anything over $2,000 needs to either be in an ABLE account or a special needs trust. So the Medicaid guidelines, and they're different for different states. Some states have higher guidelines. Most states are $2,000. Today, we're talking in Texas, and the Medicaid guidelines are still $2,000. There has been some proposed legislation to increase that. It hasn't been increased in years. It never passed. So in case you heard that it went up, it did not. It is still $2,000. So if we've got more than $2,000 in our loved one's name and we're approaching age 18, there are right ways and wrong ways to get this money out of their name. So the wrong way is to close the account, to just take the money, put it in your name, and close the account. There's look backs for that, so you don't want to do that. It is completely legitimate to move the money that is in their name into an ABLE account for their benefit. It is completely legitimate to move money that is in their name into a first party special needs trust, and those are two areas that will not count against them for the SSI or Medicaid guidelines. Another key thing, and I talk about this many times, if you've attended in the past, you've probably heard me say this, but I can't say it enough. Remove direct designations. A direct beneficiary designation is an automatic transfer that can instantly stop government benefits or Medicaid waivers. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to name our loved one with a disability directly as a beneficiary on anything that we have. That is life insurance, that is stocks, bonds, mutual funds, bank accounts, etc. The right way to do that is we name the third-party special needs trust for the benefit of said child. Then it goes into the right buckets, and it's going to preserve their eligibility for these benefits. So it's really important. So just a special note here. Of the people that are on here, I would say that there's a high percentage of people on here that have probably accidentally named their loved one with a disability as a beneficiary. So I just want to say, don't panic. First of all, you're not alone. Second of all, it's an easy fix. You can get a change of beneficiary form and you can update your beneficiaries. So what a lot of people do, and if you did this, like I said, you're not alone, you're in good company. They will name a spouse as their primary beneficiary, and then they'll name a contingent beneficiary, and the contingent is the secondary beneficiary. If I die and my spouse is already dead and gone, then who gets the money? And what a lot of people do is they name their children equally, including naming the child that has a disability. And this is wrong, and it needs to be corrected. And again, change of beneficiary forms can be obtained through your employer, through the life insurance company where you have life insurance. Again, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, pensions, 401ks, 403bs, military pensions. These are all things that really need to be looked at. Now, we can't change a beneficiary to a third-party special needs trust if the third-party special needs trust doesn't exist yet. So you may need to be working with an estate planning attorney to get that third-party special needs trust set up to be able to make those changes. But in the meantime, what you can do is not name that individual specifically, and you can change it later. You can change your beneficiaries as many times as you want to, as often as you want to, and there's no fee for changing your beneficiaries, okay? We want you to coordinate with extended family on unplanned inheritance. So what we're talking about on this beneficiary designation, we're extending this to your mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, or aunts and uncles, people that are affluent, that love your family, love your child with a disability, and could potentially leave money accidentally to them directly as opposed to the third-party special needs trust. So having intentional conversations with your family members about this is important. Remember, 0.1% of all financial advisors are nuanced and special needs. So it's very few of us. So when your parents that keep their cards close to their chest, or grandparents that don't like to share information, they go to their advisor and they say, hey, I have this grandson and he's on the spectrum and we want to help him. And they say, great, what's his name? And beneficiary gets changed to his name. And so if that happens, it can be fixed, but it becomes expensive. That's where we have an OOPS trust. It's a first party special needs trust, which you would have to pay for. And it would have to have a court order moving that money to the first party special needs trust. And a first party special needs trust has a Medicaid payback, where a third party special needs trust does not. So if we get it set up correctly on the front end, then that'll take care of that. So, ABLE or special needs trust, or both. And we say both. These tools work well together. And it helps save for the future and cover expenses without jeopardizing public benefits. We do entire presentations on special needs trust, types of special needs trust, and ABLE accounts. But they do work well together. An ABLE account can pay for things without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. And a special needs trust can pay for those same things, but if a special needs trust is paying for housing, there would be a 1/3 reduction to SSI if your loved one is getting benefits. And then the last thing is understanding public benefits. It's important to know which benefits you qualify for and know the criteria to prevent making any disqualifying mistakes. And a lot of people feel stressed about this. This is a normal feeling. And here's the confusing thing. As parents, many of us don't qualify. Our child, although they are disabled, prior to age 18, they have never qualified for public benefits. Supplemental Security Income, also known as SSI, is for the indigent and it's for the disabled. But prior to turning age 18, that indigent qualification is based off of the parent's income and assets, not the child's. So if you were denied before, it's important to know that you probably need to reapply after they turn 18, okay? Because once they turn 18, it's based off of the individual with a disability's income and assets, not your own. So one person asked, what is the difference between an ABLE account and a trust fund? An ABLE account is organized under the tax code 529A. It's achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. There are contribution limits that they have each year. They change each year. For 2026, the contribution limits are $20,000. If the individual is working, they can put up to their earnings amount of $15,650. But if they work and they only earn $5,000, they can put an additional $5,000 above and beyond that $20,000. The key thing about an ABLE account is it can pay for things that a special needs trust cannot pay for without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. An ABLE account grows tax-free. There's tax-free distributions, and if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. So another reason why you might need a special needs trust and an ABLE account is you can't make a beneficiary an ABLE account. I can't make my child's ABLE account a beneficiary on anything I have. It's an impossibility, okay? But you can make a special needs trust for said individual. There is a maximum amount of money that you can have in an ABLE account before you disqualify for SSI, and it's $100,000, which is a drop in the bucket for the amount of money that a person with a disability and their future care needs will be. Whereas a special needs trust, you can make a beneficiary, and you can also, it's an unlimited amount of money that can go into a trust each year, an unlimited amount of money that could come out of the trust. And so the long term is going to be the special needs trust, because that's where it's at. So one person said, my husband does not think a special needs trust because you can't pay for hardly anything in it. Can you briefly talk about that and what you can use a special needs trust for? So I would argue that that's not true, that you can't hardly pay for anything. And they have similar guidelines of if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for that out of the special needs trust. And it's just dicey on where if you pay for housing out of a special needs trust while they're getting SSI, then SSI would be 1/3 reduced. And a lot of people just don't even care about that. And when later down the road they move to SSDI, then you can pay for housing out of this the special needs trust without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. Okay, so it is a very long, unexhaustive list of things that you can pay for out of a special needs trust. And unless you plan to not leave enough money for the future care of your loved one, I don't see another way in the United States at this point to leave money to an individual unless you have no interest in Medicaid, Medicaid waivers, or SSI. And that is a separate conversation that we would be happy to have with a family. So how is disabled defined for SSI? So first thing is I want to say is that we do an entire presentation and it lives on our YouTube channel. So we do a lot of advocacy by way of our webinars, and all of our past webinars live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel where you can subscribe to for free. And this is called Government Benefits 101. So we go over deep and wide how and when to apply, what to expect, that kind of thing. There is something called the Social Security Blue Book. So if somebody wants to put that in the chat for me, the Social Security Blue Book, it's a medical impairment guide on the Social Security Administration website. And this is the guide that they use to determine whether or not a person is disabled. They list conditions by category. It might be neurological or cardiac or whatever, mental. Excuse me. And it tells you what they're looking for to determine if the individual is disabled. There is also something, and somebody put this in the chat box as well, called presumptive conditions that there is a compassionate allowance for. Presumptive conditions that there is a compassionate allowance for. There are some disabilities that are considered presumptive. They presume that the individual is disabled if they have these conditions. There are more than, like, I think 250 presumptive conditions. Down syndrome, for instance, is a presumptive condition. They presume that the person is disabled if they have Down syndrome, okay? And this means that when you apply for SSI, that you're, in theory, that your application should be fast-tracked and approved more promptly than those that don't have presumptive conditions. So I would suggest looking at the Social Security Blue Book for the medical impairment guide, and look up all of their diagnoses, not just one. If they have autism and ADHD and insomnia and anxiety and depression, look them all up, okay? If there's a traumatic brain injury, just make sure that you look all of those up, because sometimes the one thing that you think is going to cause them to be considered disabled is not what ends up being what causes them to show that disability. Okay, please note that a parental VA disability stipend for helpless child will reduce SSI. That is an absolute fact. Filing for helpless child stipend is optional. Some say they wish that they never did. It just depends. And basically, if a person is working or they've got other income coming in, they basically, for every $2, they don't count. They count $1 is basically what it, how that works. So working impacts benefits, VA benefits impacts benefits as well, but it doesn't impact later when they switch to Social Security disability. And I hear the person in the chat box that says, maybe I wish I didn't do that. But that also means that that individual is probably covered for by TRICARE for life. So they get Medicaid. Later, they're going to get Medicaid, Medicare, and TRICARE, which is going to equate to medical out-of-pocket expense are going to be mostly none. So I think that there are some benefits to that, but I do know what you are talking about. So one person says, we were initially denied for SSI for our daughter with Down syndrome and had to appeal. Okay, well, let's talk about that. The Social Security Administration is understaffed, overworked, and overwhelmed with applications. They have also had many people that have been there for 30 and 40 years that are retiring, and they have an influx of new employees that did not at all get the same type of training that these other people got. Years ago, I mean, these people went into 6-month training programs, and these people are getting 2 and 3 week training programs. So things could be denied erroneously. One of my kids was denied 3 times and approved on an appeal at the federal level, and retroactive approved 3.5 years. Okay, you can't even make it up. But I advise families that you should fully expect to be denied, because I just say set realistic expectations, fully expect that you may have to appeal the decision. Don't get discouraged. just know that when you apply for SSI right now in the state of Texas, these applications are taking over a year to approve. They're very, very behind. So don't think that you're going to apply for SSI and then the next month you're going to start getting $9.94 a month. It does not work like that. Okay. So have realistic expectations. The other thing that I will tell you is read every word. When they send you a letter, read every word. If they tell you you have 60 days to appeal, they mean it. And what I would suggest is appealing in the first few days of getting that letter. Get it going. I feel strongly that people have the ability to apply for SSI on their own. We provide step-by-step instructions of what to do and what not to do, and lead families and provide direction and instruction on how and when to do this. But when you've been denied, I think that's when it's important that you might want to get somebody else on your team. There are attorneys that we recommend. They don't get paid unless they win, so 100% of nothing is nothing. It's capped, and I think it's like 7% of the back pay that they can get. And most all of the people that we've worked with that we've sent over and that had a case that was denied, they won on appeal. Okay, so don't be discouraged. The other thing that I want to tell you, and this is an important thing to know, is that when you first apply for SSI, you're applying for SSDI as well. Okay, you don't know that. And then in short order, you usually get a letter saying, oh, sad face, you're denied. Your kid is denied because they're not covered. SSDI or Social Security is under Title II. SSI is under Title 16. They're two different programs. You didn't know you were applying for both. That denial letter is typically correct. The child hasn't worked, they haven't paid into the system, you should be getting the denial letter. Sadly, what that letter doesn't say is good news. We received your SSI application, we're still working on it, we're a year behind, and we'll be back with you in the future. So a lot of times when people get that initial letter of denial, they think that they've been categorically denied for everything, and that is not the case. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. It'll save yourself some stress there. Okay, so timeline of benefits, diagnosis, work with your doctor to be sure everything is documented. What are their diagnoses? When were they diagnosed? Have a list of names, address, and phone numbers of doctors, names of diagnoses, names of meds that they take, and what they are for. They don't care about the milligrams, but they want to know what they take and what they're for. Know about waiver programs. All states have Medicaid waiver programs. They require Medicaid eligibility. And sometimes that Medicaid eligibility is based off of the child's income and assets, and sometimes it's based off of the parents. Most of the time, it's based off of the child's income and assets as it relates to waiver programs. Okay, they're straight up Medicaid, and waiver programs are something else. But waiver programs are designed to waive off some of the cost of care for caring for an individual with a disability to keep them in home and community-based services. It may pay for such things as minor home modifications, attendant care. Sometimes a parent can be paid as a caregiver. It may pay for housing. It depends on the waiver. The names of the waiver are all different for all different states. We definitely do webinars on Medicaid waivers. In fact, I think that's tomorrow. We have a Medicaid waiver one, and we have our past Texas Medicaid waiver webinar on our Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, so you can check it out. The waiting list in Texas is very long, 17 to 20 years before you are actually going to qualify for a waiver. So you want to make sure that your child is on all of the waiting list for these waivers. Some states don't have any waiting list at all. So if you're listening in from another state, you're going to want to check your state specifically. The two longest waiting list states that I know are Texas and Florida, which are about the same. What I have also found is states that have state income tax typically have shorter waiting list or no waiting list. States that do not have state income tax typically have very long waiting lists. So it's worth that to check into that, but you definitely want to look at that. And as I mentioned before, most children are not going to qualify for SSI until they're 18 years old. It is based off of the parents' assets and income. So prior to turning age 18. Okay, so the income limit for Medicaid waivers is 300% of SSI, depending on the waiver. Okay, so that's kind of a blanket statement. And some of the waivers, like the Texas Home Living, has a different requirement. But right now, SSI is $994 a month. So if we say 300%, that's going to be 2,982 is the maximum monthly income for instance, like the HCS waiver. One person says, is it true if a person passes away that they can get moved to the front of the line of the waiver list? So maybe. So what I would say is there is a such thing as an HCS in Texas, an HCS crisis diversion slot. So in the example that a caregiver that was once providing services no longer can due to incapacitation or illness or death, then a person may be considered for a crisis diversion slot, which moves them from a 17-year waiting list to right now. Another reason a person might be eligible for a crisis diversion slot is maybe they're a threat to themselves or others. They're at risk of being placed outside the home. There are many reasons for crisis diversions, but that's how you get moved up quickly on the list. The other thing that I want to tell you is that just because you're on the list in Texas, if you move out of state, you got to get on their list. So if they have a long waiting list, all that time you've been waiting in this state doesn't matter. Likewise, if you're moving to the state of Texas from another state, let's say you're moving from California and you got a beautiful Medicaid waiver in California and you'd like to transfer that waiver to Texas, it doesn't work like that. So it's not like if you were getting another waiver in another state and you move here, you get to keep it. Okay. So choose wisely. It's important to note. And some people say, well, why don't I just move to a state that's a better state for people with disabilities? You certainly can. And we do financial analysis on that all the time of what does that mean, dollars and cents, if I do that. And what we have found is that moving to a state that might be better for disabilities, it may be better for disabilities, but it may have a several $100,000 to several $1 million deficit to your overall financial plan because of higher taxes, because of higher costs of living, etc. So it's a trade-off. So you might get one thing over here, but over here you lost the low cost of living and no state tax. So you got to choose wisely on that. Okay. SSDI, when a parent turns on their Social Security, the child can also get benefits under a parent's record. And it's and or, okay, it's not plus, okay? So when we have a child whose disability started prior to age 22, they have the ability to be covered under a parent's record for Social Security or Social Security disability. And we also see this for survivor benefits when a parent dies. And basically the amount is 50%. So in the example that your Social Security benefit is $4,000 a month, when you turn that on, you're going to apply for childhood disability benefits, also known as CDB, for 40 years. They called it DAC, Disabled Adult Child, and then they changed it 3 or 4 years ago to CDB, but it's the same thing. They're going to be eligible for 50% of what you get. Your benefit is not going to be reduced. There is a such thing as family maximums. If we have more than one child in the household drawing from a record, there is a such thing as family maximums. So the calculation is not always a perfect 50%. When you die, that amount increases to 75%. So one thing that comes up all the time is people say, well, I'm really scared about that when that happens, when I die and their benefits go up to 75%, then the income is going to be more than that 300% of SSI, and they're going to lose their Medicaid waiver that we waited 17 years to get. And there are protections under the law that prevents that from happening. So that is not a thing that you have to worry about. But if the individual is working on top of that, then they may have to stop working or start working less to be within those guidelines. Okay, so this is just a quick list for Texas on how to get on the waiver wait list. Do this as soon as you can. Excuse me. There's MDCP, class, deaf, blind, multiple disabilities. That's one phone number. You want to contact your LIDA, your local intellectual disability authority. We've got the contact list here, so you can look up your LIDA. Your local intellectual developmental disability authority is by county. If you move, your LITA moves. Okay, you get a new LITA, but you don't lose your place in line. So there are different places. So there's basically three in Texas. So it's your LITA for HCS, Texas Home Living Community First Choice. There's the Star Plus waiver for 21 and older. And then there's class MDCP, deaf-blind, multiple disabilities. And so this is going to be how you do that. So everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording. So any of the things that we've talked about, you're going to have that in your, so you can refer back to some of the things that we talked about. So the key benefits for SSI is supplemental security income. As I mentioned, it's under Title II. It's a public assistance program funded by the U.S. General Tax Revenues, not the Social Security Trust Fund. It is needs-based. Eligibility is based on financial need. It does not require any prior work history or payment of FICA taxes. Income and asset tested. It pays monthly benefits to the disabled, blind, or elderly individuals who have limited income and limited resources who are disabled. There is a strict resource limit, and this is what we were talking about. The maximum countable resource limit is $2,000, $3,000 for a couple. What I will say is you can have one house and one car in every situation. That is not counted. The house could be worth any amount. The car could be a Rolls Royce. You could live in a $5 million house, one house and one car. But it is the assets that you've got to look at and keep under the $2,000. Okay. So SSI eligibility, considered disabled by SSA, under $2,000 in assets, working less and earning less than the substantial gainful amount. The substantial gainful amount, or also known as substantial gainful activity for 2026, is $1,690. So basically, a person could work and be disabled, but if they're working and they're earning more than $1,690 gross earning per month from employment income, they're simply not considered disabled in the eyes of the Social Security Administration. Some people say, I heard this is $1,000 a month. It was like 10 years ago. This amount goes up. The substantial gainful amount goes up every year. And for blind applicants, the substantial gainful amount for 2026 is $2,830. So these are things to keep in mind. A lot of our kids are working with a vocational rehab program, or maybe Ticket to Work, or summer earn and learn, and they may have a small job. And so this is the amount that you need to keep in mind, that it would disqualify them if they're earning more than that. Okay. So file for SSI, apply the month, I would say the month after their 18th birthday is what we've been told this year. So you can get the earliest possible protective filing date. We suggest scheduling that interview a few months in advance for a date after their 18th birthday, the month following their 18th birthday. They are taking applications online, they are taking applications by phone, and they are taking applications in person. If you're going in person, we strongly recommend that you have an appointment, or you could very well sit down at the Social Security Administration for 6 hours. You should expect nothing more, okay? Backdating. So when you apply, I told you, these applications are taking a very long time to get approved. They're taking over a year, but once they are approved, they will backdate to the date of the application. And this is the link that you can apply for benefits online, okay? So what benefits will I receive from SSI? The maximum monetary benefit is $994 a month. For a married couple and they're both disabled, it's $1491. SSI comes with Medicaid. So SSI comes with Medicaid, okay? And again, this $994 a month, if you, your child, if they're getting SSI and they're getting less than $994 a month, it might be because they have an earnings reduction. It could be because they have a VA, helpless child reduction. And it could be because you have not indicated that your loved one is paying rent, and you need to advise the Social Security Administration that they are paying rent. Anything above 350, 400, 500, 600, we see people use that all the time, will get that amount to the $994 a month. So you do have to have communications. Somebody said in the chat, SSA has reduced in-person services during the government shutdown. They have done that. I was actually in there last Friday and 3 weeks ago Friday, and it was not great. I mean, I think one time I was there 3.5 and then hours, and then the other one I was there 2.5 hours. But they do have in-person services, but you might get services quicker if you do the phone application or the online application, and then they follow up with that. Okay. So things that can impact the amount that you receive from SSI, child support. So in a lot of states, including Texas, a lot of people that are paying child support may be mandated to pay child support post age 18 for the individual that has a disability. This child support, even though it's coming to the other parent, will reduce the amount of SSI, and it could eliminate SSI completely. Okay, so it is important that if you have child support that's going to continue post age 18, that it is redirected to a first party special needs trust. If it's redirected to a first party special needs trust, it will not reduce the SSI. Okay, working. The limit we talked about is 1690, 2830 if blind. Working reduces SSI benefits, but as long as you don't earn over SGA, you'll still receive Medicaid. So in general, there's a $20 exclusion. There is an $85 earned income exclusion if they're earning money. So they don't count $65. So they don't count the first $85. And then they take the full monthly gross earnings and then they divide that by 2. And that is how much is going to reduce the SSI benefit. And it usually runs about 2 months behind. So it's like, so let's give the example. If the kid worked in January, you need to report between the 1st and the 5th their earnings in February. Okay. And then in March is when their benefit would be reduced. Okay. Working while in school, there is a student earned income exclusion. You can ask for this. They don't regularly tell you about it, but if they're in school, whether it is transition program, high school, homeschool, university, community college, there is a student earned income exclusion for people that are between ages 18 and 22. Well, they will not reduce their SSI benefits during that time if they're working and a full-time student, which is considered 8 hours. They don't have to be taking 12-hour course load that we're familiar with as a full-time course load. What are mandatory Medicaid groups? If my child exceeds 997 limit but previously got CFC caregiver, can she still qualify for Medicaid if current income is at $1,500 a month? So again, that is a very specific question, and it is going to depend on the specific waiver on that. So I would say reach out and we'll kind of take a deeper dive on that. But there is a such thing as a mandatory Medicaid group. What she is speaking of is, let's say my child is getting SSI and Medicaid. Let's say I retire and I turn on my Social Security benefits, and as a result, I apply for childhood disability benefits under a parent's record. And now, instead of getting SSI $994 a month, now in my example, I'm getting $4,000 a month. Now my kid's going to start getting $2,000 a month, which is higher than the Medicaid. It's a higher income limit than Medicaid in general allows. So because my kid was getting SSI and Medicaid first and was switching over to childhood disability benefits and would whereby lose Medicaid through the Social Security Administration, they are considered a mandatory Medicaid group. So you'll get a letter that they're losing Medicaid through the Social Security Administration, but they are a mandatory Medicaid group, which means that you need to do a new Medicaid application. You need to send a cover letter explaining that they just switched from SSI and Medicaid to childhood disability benefits under a parent's record, and as a result, they lost Medicaid, and they are a mandatory Medicaid group, and please reinstate their Medicaid immediately. Okay, so we've talked a lot about SSI versus SSDI. So one of the things I just want to make sure, for SSDI, again, it's an insurance program funded by payroll taxes. Workers earn enough work credits to be insured for eligibility. It's based on disability and work history. Eligibility requires meeting the strict SSA definition of disability, and that's all going to be in the Blue Book. It is not a needs-based program. Qualification is not dependent on the recipient's personal income or assets, unlike SSI. And again, it's still going to be the substantial gainful amount. If a person is working and they're earning more than 1690 gross earnings per month for 2026, then they're still not going to be considered disabled in the eyes of the Social Security Administration. It includes DAC. We talked about the provides benefits for disabled workers and adult disabled since childhood DAC benefits based off of the parent's record. So what I would say is, I think take a deeper dive, reach out to us. We can definitely help you with these types of things. It is very confusing. So if you have felt confused about all of this, you're certainly not alone. We've had people that have attended these webinars over and over and over again because they learn something new every time they hear it. The Social Security Administration has a lot of acronyms. Some of their acronyms don't sound the same at all, but they're the exact same program. And some of their acronyms sound exactly the same, but they're not the same program at all. And they're under two, different programs. So Social Security benefits for the disabled adult child, CDB, under Social Security or SSDI. Benefit trigger: parent receives retirement disability, or parent passes away. Those are survivor benefits. CDB auxiliary benefit, up to 50% of the parent's amount. When they turn on their Social Security or Social Security disability, that goes up to 75% when the parent passes away. And the key details that you need to know is a disabled adult child must have become disabled prior to age 22 to be eligible for childhood disability benefits under a parent's record. So if you had a child that was not disabled and then had a traumatic brain injury at age 25, they're not going to be eligible for the childhood disability benefits, but they may have worked and they may be eligible for disability benefits under their own record. And I mentioned this earlier. The family maximum is a real thing when it comes to these benefits. So the calculations might not be exactly 50% or 75%. So let's see. So the disabled person income must be spent or moved into an ABLE account every single month so that the bank account below is never above $2,000. So spent down for the individual's benefits, moved to an ABLE account. Their income can come into the account where the SSI goes, but we just want to make sure that if we're trying to maintain our eligibility for state and federally funded programs, that their assets are lower than $2,000. So that is going to be an important factor, and they're serious about it. So you want to have those tools, the special needs trust, first party if it's their money, third party if this is how we leave money to an individual with a disability, and that ABLE account is a really nice place to offload benefits. Okay, so CDB, SSDI benefits, once a person qualifies for childhood disability benefits, once they're over age 18, after 24 months of getting CDB benefits or Social Security benefits under a parent's record, they're going to be eligible for Medicare. So it's 24 months after being approved. After age 18, they have to be older than age 18 and have been approved for SSDI or childhood disability benefits under a parent's record, or SSDI benefits under their own record. Medicare is an automatic enrollment after 24 months, so they'll be dual eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, so ABLE accounts, I would invite you, because we're running out of time for today, check out our ABLE account presentation on our Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. I already hit the highlights of how much you can put in each year. There are maximum account balances before a person would be ineligible for SSI, so pay attention to those. And this presentation will have the guidelines of what you can contribute to an ABLE account, and the guidelines. It used to be that the disability had to start prior to age 26 for ABLE accounts, and in 2026, that age changed, that the disability needed to start prior to age 46. Now, that does not change the guidelines for disability starting prior to age 22. So this slide is going to talk about the differences of an ABLE account versus a third-party special needs trust. I know we had some questions in the chat box about this. This would be a great slide to share with your family member that had questions or felt like the special needs trust was a bad idea. Again, we think you should have both. It is an important thing. So we've kind of hit on educational options after high school, transition programs, residential communities, vocational opportunities. Guys, we have presentations on every single one of these topics on what should we be looking at, what are some of the educational options post high school, transition programs, residential, vocational. So you'll want to check that out on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. We've talked about a lot of things today, and your head is probably spinning. So I invite you back. Come check out our YouTube channel. We've organized it in such a way that you can kind of click on the webinars that are appropriate for the step that you're on. That we have over 500 webinars on our YouTube channel, and that was honestly born out of my own frustration on why is this stuff so hard. When my kids were transitioning into adulthood, I know this stuff. I eat, sleep, and breathe it, and I still thought it was unnecessarily difficult. So check those out. You're going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording. This will have our upcoming webinars that you can see what's coming up, and you can register for those for the future. We always offer free personalized consultations. So if you had questions today that didn't get answered, reach out to us. We can help you. We are an advisory and consulting firm. Most people that come to us already have an advisor. That's okay. Some people have done a lot of planning and they just want a second opinion. Some people have got started and they put it on the shelf and they need to pick up where they left off. And other people have done nothing and they would say that they're embarrassed on what they haven't done. So I say it's not about looking back, it's about looking forward. You're here now and taking the steps that you need to take to be successful in your own retirement and in the 25 to 35 years once you're gone for your loved one. So this QR code on the screen, and again, you'll get a copy of these slides, will take you to our calendar where you can schedule your free personalized consultation. We'll answer any additional questions that you had, and we'll share with you the doors that you can walk through at CPG and how we might be able to be a member of your team when it comes to planning for your loved one. So it has certainly been my pleasure being here with you guys today. We're out of time for today, but check your email, check your spam to get the, we're going to send that email out later today with the slides and the recording. And we will look forward to partnering with Conroe ISD again in the future. And thank you everyone for attending today and asking such great questions and sharing in the chat box. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.